My name is Tiffany Lee. I'm the chair and a professor of Native American Studies here at the University of New Mexico. I'd like to first begin by doing my proper introduction in my language of Diné. So, She Tiffany Lee Inishia, the message in Inishma, Naslana Bashish Chin, Senjikina Dasha Chedo, Naslana Dashanala, Swansilla de Nasha, Be Dil Dasanel a Nashnish, Viet Awe Dinestan a Nishla. So thank you everybody. Welcome. What I said basically was that I introduced my clans. I'm Navajo of the Black Sheep clan. My family on my mother's side comes from Crystal, New Mexico. And I'm a Glala Lakota from Pine Ridge, South Dakota on my father's side. I also have some French, Irish, and German in there somewhere. And I just said that I come from Crystal and I work here in Albuquerque. We'd like to begin with, as Indigenous people, we always open things with a prayer, so we're grateful to have Governor Toledo from Jemez Pueblo here, who I'd like to call up to offer us a prayer, opening prayer.
Good morning. I am Governor David Toledo of Pueblo Jemez. Thank you for allowing me to be here. President Stokes, thank you for your welcome. I brought my second lieutenant with me, Mr. Yepa, all the way from Jemez. Just the first 5 minutes, it's been a warm reception from the staff and from the students here. Thank you for being here.
We're also really proud and grateful to have one of our alumni, Emma Yempa from Jemez Pueblo, to offer us an honor song.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Emma Yempa from the Pueblo of Jemez. I'm a former student at NES, graduate class of 2016. Happy to be here. NES changed my life. It's a good program, and all the staff, tremendous. So this time I want to provide an honor song for you. I hope you enjoy. Thank So very briefly, one that I just sang has Toa words. So talking about eagles flying up above, it's made its way here, about blessings, and just wanted to sing that song, compose that song. I wanted to sing that song so you all can have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yepa and Mr. Governor Toledo. The prayer and the honor song are Indigenous ways of acknowledging our place and our land. and our connection, our spiritual connection as well to where we are. I'd also just like to acknowledge that UNM sits on the ancestral homelands of the Pueblos of Sandia and Tiwa people. And the original people of New Mexico also have strong connections. Navajo, Apache, and Pueblo people have strong connections to this area, and we want to honor that and our relationships to each other as well. So I will be your MC for the day, and it's my proud honor to introduce our current president of the university. In 2018, President Garnet Stokes became the UNM's 23rd president. She's a first-generation college graduate and earned her PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. She's an experienced leader in higher education and is the first female president in UNM's 129 history. So I'd like to introduce Garnet Stokes, President Stokes.
Dr. Lee, thank you so much for that introduction. And my warmest greetings to everyone here, all the students, the teachers, the community leaders, and the tribal elders who are joining us here today as well. This is a great day to celebrate. It's a joyous occasion as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of our extraordinary Native American Studies program. And it's one of the oldest in this country. To the students here today, let me say that this is your program, literally. Native American Studies was born as a direct result of student activism, created at the behest of the UNM's Native American student organization, the Kiva Club. The Kiva Club rightly insisted that the university be more, yes, Kiva Club, I heard that, yes. The Kiva Club rightly insisted that the university be more inclusive of Native American history, experiences, and perspectives. And so it was in 1970 that UNM formally unveiled its Native American Studies program. And I have to say what a proud program it's been for 50 years. Since 1970, Native American Studies has grown from just a program to offering a minor degree in 1999 to graduating its first BA recipient in 2005. As I stand here today, it's not only also a full-fledged department, but it has also launched an online bachelor's degree, and it's on its way to graduating its first generation of students with master's degrees. So over the last half a century, the Native American Studies program has made UNM a richer place, a smarter place, and certainly a more culturally diverse place. At UNM, we celebrate the 23 tribal nations, including the 19 Pueblos, the 3 Apache tribes, and the Navajo Nation, that weave the bright colors of our state's entire cultural tapestry. And at UNM, we openly and proudly embrace the knowledge that the university sits on the land that once belonged to the people of Sandia and Isleta Pueblos. We honor this part of our unique heritage. We honor all of our Native American students from tribes across the nation who bring their unique stories, experiences, and spirit to our university. So Dr. Lee, to you, your teachers and staff, your students, and all of those who came before you, I want to say congratulations to you on this remarkable milestone of 50 years. You honor this university and your people with your passion and commitment. And we at UNM, and I know all across New Mexico, and probably given our visibility across the country, are looking to see just what will the next 50 years bring. I hope you have a wonderful day of celebration. Thank you.
Thank you, President Stokes. It's my pleasure to now introduce our Provost at UNM, James Holloway. He started just last fall, but has met with many Native faculty and come to many of our events, so we're really happy about that and see you supporting our programs.
It's a great deal who went first, because she said what I was going to say. No matter, she's my boss, so I will say some different things. I really want to note 50 years. 50 years is a remarkable achievement in any area of human work. 50 years of marriage, or 50 years for a company, or 50 years for an institution. 50 years for Native American Studies is truly a remarkable accomplishment, and recognizes, I think, the deep connections and strengths that this program brings to this work with Native populations and about Native populations. The Native American Studies program here is truly remarkable. Over 200 graduates with bachelor's and master's, or bachelor's and minors. The first graduate with a master's has just happened, and more are coming. There's work in place to design and think about a doctoral program as well. That's remarkable. Equally remarkable is that the Native American Studies program is one of the very few in the nation that has faculty lines dedicated to Native American Studies. That's fairly rare, and those faculty lines and the staff of the program are all themselves Native Americans. This is also a very rare structure within Native American Studies programs across the country, and I think again reflects the incredible strength and depth of this program. For the students in this program, I think there's an equally important character to the program, and that it is really founded in experiential learning. It's founded in identifying students, both Native, Hispanic, Anglo, all students who are interested in working with Native American communities and finding ways to strengthen those communities, and to do so through project-based experiential opportunities. That's a really fairly unique characteristic as well of this program, and a tremendous strength. In my previous institution, one of my jobs was to encourage experiential learning across the institution. And my provost in that program assured me that I would never get faculty in the humanities or in ethnic studies to do experiential-based work. This institution shows that that's a wrong view. And truly, the programs here that bring students together with Native communities for the education of those students and the strengthening of those communities is incredibly unique and important. And so we're really thrilled to see 50 years of Native American Studies and to see the next 50 years as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Provost Holloway. I'd also like to now introduce and call the Associate Vice President for Student Affairs and Student Services, Tim Gutierrez. Student Affairs provides support services for UNM's large and diverse student population. So thank you for coming and offering some welcome.
Well, you've gotten all the welcomes from my boss and my boss above me. So, but Student Affairs would also like to add their welcome to the tribal leaders, community, faculty, staff, students at this symposium. We want to also extend our congratulations for the 50 years of being a department, an organization on this campus, which is making a difference. You heard a little bit about the history of the Kiva Club students responsible for developing the beginning of the department. Well, the Native American Studies program was also responsible for the birth of American Indian Student Services. So for that, we are very grateful. Our director, Pam Magoya, who is in the back there, Pam, you want to say hi to everybody? She is part of the critical piece of making sure that the partnership between Native American Studies and American Indian Student Services continues, and always supporting the students as well as our community members. I also want to mention that I think this is a great way to recognize Mayola Cordova, who was a pioneer, a leader, somebody who I think is an example of how individuals can succeed, continues to this day. So I think no better way than to talk about leadership and community involvement with this symposium and recognizing Mayola Cordova. With that said, I want to wish you the best for today, and as the President said, I look forward, maybe not me, but look forward to the next 50 years of what Native American Studies is able to accomplish. So, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for those wonderful remarks, opening remarks, and starting our day off in a right way. I would also like to introduce some other important leaders and community members from UNM as well. I saw that Dr. Zarai from the Division of Equity Inclusion is here, if you don't mind just waving. Daisy Thompson from the APS Indian Education Office is here, yep, it's there. And I was going to mention Pam Magoya, the Director of American Indian Student Services. And then we have a group from SIPI, students and faculty. You guys would wave. Very happy to see you guys here. I'd also like to recognize our Indigenous faculty and staff, but particularly in Native American Studies. I'll name all of them, if we could all stand. Okay, sure. Yeah. Our former director, Dr. Greg Kahete, Dr. Lloyd Lee, Leola Sinajini Pequin, Wendy Gray Eyes, Melanie Yazzie, and Yolanda Turan, if she's here. And then our staff, Catherine Montoya, Melanie, our Senior Student Success Specialist, Dalia Halona, our Program Coordinator, and then our Graduate Assistant, Zonaba Martin, and our intern, Alicia Corice. Give them a welcome. And UNM is, we're an amazing place in all the numbers of Indigenous faculty and staff we have here. We have, I think, about 50 or maybe over 50 faculty across UNM, including the law school and medical school. So I'd like to recognize all the Indigenous faculty and staff that are present here today, if you wouldn't mind standing. Thank you. And then we have some wonderful co-sponsors, the Institute for American Indian Research. Thank you for your support. The Advance at UNM and the Alfonso Ortiz Center for Intercultural Studies is supporting our event today. So thank you to them. So 2020, as you know, marks the 50th anniversary of Native American Studies at UNM, and this is our kickoff event. We plan to hold feature speakers and community events throughout the year, so please stay tuned and look out for our announcements and all the different social media and listservs and ways that we spread the news. Each year, NAS holds a symposium in honor of the late Dr. Viola Cordova. Our 50th anniversary kickoff event today is in her name. She was Hickory Apache and was the first Native American woman to earn a PhD in philosophy from UNM. She was born in 1937 and received her PhD in 1992. She published many of her writings and was highly respected and regarded for articulating and defining a Native American philosophy. After she passed away, many of her colleagues organized her writings into the highly acclaimed book, How It Is, The Native American Philosophy of V.F. Cordova, which was published in 2007. She believed in challenging Western frameworks of knowledge and spoke about the duty of Native people to speak for ourselves based on our own worldviews and lived experiences. In her book, How It Is, she stated, and I'm quoting from her book, "We have earned the right to become doctors, lawyers, scientists. We have not yet been accorded the right to speak for ourselves. Our myths, in quotes, and legends, in quotes, are explored over and over again in many disciplines, and always the explanations seem inadequate to Native Americans. The time has come for American Native peoples to give their own explanations, and that is the relevance of the study of philosophy for Native Americans. Not to see ourselves as others see us, but to look at ourselves through our own eyes." Yes. So I want to thank Dr. Cordova for helping us to think more deeply and critically and to define how we see ourselves and our futures. You are going to be inspired by today's guests and panelists as we reflect all day in the first panel on the origins of NAS, followed by our keynote address by Dr. Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. We'll also look at contemporary practices and activism and scholarship in NAS and the future desires of NAS and our current alumni community-based work. So thank you for all being here. I'd like to now call up Dr. Lloyd Lee, who will moderate our first panel.
If we could have Dr. Kahete, Dr. Nahola, Dr. Francis come up. Is Marley Shabala here? She could come up as well. These are our four panelists on the first panel for today, the origins of Native American Studies at UNM. They could come on up here and take a seat. But with this group of panel, we wanted to really kind of look at the history of NAS when it first started, and also its growth and maturity as a program and then as a department. So I sent them a list of 5 questions before the panel here to kind of get them thinking about how they were going to respond and their thoughts as it relates to their time at Native American Studies, and then also their experiences throughout the years here at UNM. So I'll go ahead and kind of moderate the panel, kind of leave it to them as to how long they want to respond. But I hope every one of them can provide some really deep and thoughtful perspectives as it relates to these questions and their experiences here at UNM, just to see that history and to see that vitality of Native American studies here at UNM. So that's sort of the focus of the panel. So the first question is a question about when it first was established in 1970 and what it was like here at UNM for the Native students at that time. You know, in late 1968, 69 is when the students, the Kiva Club students, the students on campus organized and advocated for Native American studies. And so, so that was the first question that I sent to them, was what was it like for the students at the time NAS was established in 1970? You guys want to start talking away?
All right, well, I'll just kind of project this as much as I can. But the first thing I want to acknowledge is that who would have thought that, 50 years would be coming so quick? I actually am wearing our celebration 25th anniversary Native American Studies. It'll be up for auction. After the show. But, I can't really project to the 1970s per se, because I became Director of Native American Studies in 1980, and like to sort of characterize my tenure there 16 dog years after I finally passed on and came down as Director in 1996. But I guess it kind of goes back to Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz and Simon Ortiz at that time. In 1980, when I had just gotten off of my own field research during my PhD and at the University of Hawaii and doing my field studies in the Philippines, and just sort of in a timely way coming back in order to begin to start writing my dissertation after that experience. And coming right in the middle of what was then the anniversary of the 1680 Pueblo Revolt. And I was in that forum that was being addressed, and I vocalized a couple of things about what I thought that was all about. And I distinctly remember Roxanne and Simon coming up to me afterwards and basically asking in a very polite way, "Who the hell are you? And where did you come from?" Because I really hadn't been part of the community at that point, since most of my time had been spent in Hawaii. So technically I never officially applied to the position. Instead, I was kind of gerrymandered and recruited into it with, it'll just be a year, it'll be a nice experience. And that interim position extended for 2 years, but I think the kind of pivotal point in that was that in the second year then, when I finished my dissertation, I actually was recruited by another colleague, Bill Simbieda, in the planning program to become part of their faculty. It had just been newly established, and he had read that I had gotten my planning degree at MIT, and he felt that I was perfectly qualified in order to begin to be one of the faculty there. So one of the things that really was significant about that was that it sort of changed the game plan of how it is that we were to grow as a program. Because rather than being an administrator of a program, I actually was able to negotiate a tenure track position, and in that position then get half-time release to become the Director of Native American Studies. It set a precedent with the other minority ethnic programs who were all based in administration as well too. So this was really the first time then that it became kind of that kind of structure to actually be able to recruit directors who were of academic tenure and rank. which I think was really a game changer in terms of where it is that we positioned ourselves in terms of our degree program. So even, at that point, things around that were kind of contentious. I remember in terms of credentialing, because when I finally did get tenure, I remember very vividly that the letter came back from the Provost's office denying my tenure. And even though I had gotten accolades from my colleagues, from the dean on up the food chain, it was reversed at the provost level on the basis of the fact that they felt that my scholarship was really for Native people and really wasn't research per se within the field of planning. And I felt that to be sort of totally disingenuous, and in fact when I petitioned against it, I basically pointed out to them that I don't think that they wanted to establish the precedence that if a white scholar then does research in poor communities, then they should be denied tenure on that basis. So, long story short, they reversed that, but I think that that kind of typified the kind of culture, which I think unfortunately still kind of persists to this day in terms of how academics really, who are activists and really community grounded in a way, have a hard time trying to build that kind of acknowledgement in their scholarship. So what did I inherit? Interestingly enough, it was really a very toxic environment because, we were coming out of the period of activism. Kiva Club, Larry Cassous, AIM, all these kinds of things really sort of identified our programs as being centers of dissent. And I remember things were so contentious that the UNM post office even refused to deliver mail to our center. And we had to sort of negotiate all of that. And it really, in a way, then kind of behooved me of how is it that we could kind of break that and do it in a way then that would elevate our recognition and stature throughout the university. So that coming out event was actually a huge film festival that we did in 1971. We brought together about 40 sessions, the who's who that was doing a whole genre of different types of things. We, I think, premiered over about 120 films. We even got Robert Redford to come. Geraldine Keynes was my sort of co-executive organizer for that in that period. And it became really, really very successful and kind of began to sort of project us into an organization that could actually get something of that level done. In fact, some of you who know Beverly Singer used to be director of the Ortiz Center. That was her dissertation around that particular event, and that's eventually what she published as her book as well, too. The biggest asset that we had, though, was our building, where it used to be 1812 Las Lomas. It's now the Dane Smith Hall. And I think I remember the first day that I actually went into that building. I don't know if Roxanne remembers this and even knows who the origin of that amazing painting was that was on the wall there, some kind of AIM cowboy, Indian cowboy that had these dark glasses, and it was so unreal and unsettling because no matter where you walked in the center, it was like it was following you with its eyes. Anyway, that was one of the things that I pledged to get rid of as soon as I can. But really, literally, what I inherited was what I say is a broken down Xerox machine and a half-time secretary, which we shared within the American Indian Student Services. The other thing about that building was the decor was basically hand-me-down gray BIA furniture. It sort of looked like something that had come down from surplus as part of World War II acquisition. The basement was basically a graveyard of past projects and equipment. And the university would put absolutely no money into the building because they had resigned to the fact that it was going to be raised anyway, so why should they invest? So we put a lot of sweat equity into that building. And the way that we were able to get leverage is that a lot of the crew, the painting crew and the maintenance crew, were from the Sleta and were from some of the other tribes, so we just called in favors, and they sort of did it, you know, and when they were busy with something else, and slowly but surely we got it up to a point where it began to bring a level of professionalism. We still needed money, but how we were going to do that, I think, became another strategy. I'd love to recount the fact that the way that we did it was there was a whole cluster of old houses there, and they all housed the minority ethnic programs. But what we did in terms of reinventing ourselves is we replaced that broken down Xerox machine by contracting a fancier machine that had an Autotron, and we gave it all to the various directors. And what would happen is that every copy that we made, we would get 1 cent in profit. And you know how opposites can go through paper. So we became so money flush, and it became such a good enterprise that achieved 2 things. Number 1, we got money that we could spend. And number 2, we also became a social hub, because that's where all the people came together in the Xerox room in order to sort of exchange, you know, talk about stuff. In fact, we became so lucrative that when the UNM administration found out what we were doing, they read us the Riot Act and shut us down. And that became actually the nexus of the copy centers which we have today. Because a good figure, they turned it into an enterprise. We also had the ability to sort of build on programs that Roxanne had established with ENAD, the Institute for Native American Development. They actually have been doing a lot of economic development seminars. We continued that. We also jointly published numbers of publications with UNM Press. We also supported other summer programs like SILNA. So in that way, then we began to position ourselves much more. We also received grants from the outside. We established our own computing center thanks to Wheels of the Mind grant from Apple Computer. Had some of the first Macintoshes in the university at the time when everybody said go with Microsoft instead. And we finally positioned ourselves in the 1990s to actually begin digging out of where it was that we entered into the decade before. We basically use faculty contracts with other NAS courses offered by other departments in order to leverage our program development. We had especially a good relationship with American Studies and English. Some of the luminaries that were around at that time were Gary Hobson, who really sort of functioned as my co-director. There was Simon Ortiz, Lucy Tapahanso, Joy Harjo, Alfonso Ortiz, a number of other luminaries who went on to establish their own sort of careers, but NAS was instrumental in being able to sort of leverage and maintain programming with them involved. The game changer for us, though, was really in 1994 when we were able to leverage recurring funding of $250,000 from the state legislature, thanks to Representative Bert Shirley. And that really, in a sense, kind of spurred us on because it allowed us to remodel and expand our building, both with extended offices as well as a new library. And we added new FTE, including information specialists, academic advisors. By that time, we had about 6 full FTE supporting the program, as well as all our part-time faculty. And when I actually left in '96, we had about 20 people employed at the center. It was also the point where we finally began to get around and debate what's the pedagogy for Native American Studies in anticipation of a degree program. And at that point, I actually proposed changing Native American Studies to the Southwest Center for Indigenous Studies. And boy, did all hell break loose. I didn't know that anything was so sacred about a name, but I found out really quickly because all the Native American and American Indian holy rollers came around and said, you know, that was blasphemy to think about anything indigenous from that standpoint. So it's kind of ironic in a way that everything that was branded as indigenous, right? We could have been way ahead of the curve if people had just sort of bit the bullet and allowed us to be able to do that. We also felt that we wanted to just establish a focus and a specialization to distinguish ourselves from all other Native American, American Indian programs in the world. And we thought that the best way to do that was actually to focus on Native American stereotyping. And we actually began to amass a collection of representation around that, and our library essentially began to sort of build key kinds of scholarly books and library emphasis on that area. And that was sort of the projected goal that we really hoped that we could establish in terms of our role within the university in general. So just sort of winding down, in '96 then we did establish a degree program. That was the first degree program. And probably the reason why it's not really acknowledged so much is because we really believe more in a distributed model. That is, not so much, do we build our own kind of internal capacity for our faculty, but we really saw that we should advocate and distribute for Native faculty to be represented in all the traditional departments. And the degree program was essentially modeled after that as well, too. We took on the same sort of structure as the honors program, where if a student took a prescribed curriculum in their area of studies, then they would actually leverage and come out with a specialization in that degree. So you could have a BA in English, for example, with specialization in Native American studies. And that essentially was what we moved through the faculty and got it approved. That was basically my swan song at that point, because I said, I'll stay until the point that I established a degree program. So in '96 then, I made my intent to step away. And interestingly enough, 2 weeks after I announced that, the university administration then announced that they were going to raise all of those buildings to make way for the Dane Smith Hall. And it was kind of really tragic and sad in a way, because we had a beautiful space. It was our space. And it really never has come to fruition. I know we've got some beginnings of a discussion about building a center just for Native people, Native students, Native community, but yet it doesn't seem to be getting that much traction at this particular point. But we had it already, and it's just unfortunate that what the university chose to do was actually put the program in limbo for about 4 or 5 years, with kind of people going in and out, assuming the directorship, but none that were really, in a way, actually recruited in the typical way that you would do strategically for bringing somebody in terms of their advertisement and presentation of their qualifications. So when that happened, essentially, I think a lot of the momentum essentially waned, and it took a while in order to rebuild it, to reconstruct it all again. It really, in a way, kind of put us in a situation where we were discouraged, and I think it's just been the resiliency of those other directors who came in order to have to pick up the pieces and sort of restructure it all over again. But that's kind of, I guess, the sort of ebb and tide of how even our programs are subjected to these kinds of cycles in terms of their evolution and development. So with that said, that in a nutshell is sort of the highlights of some of the things that certainly occurred under my tenure. And I think at that point I'll pass it on to Lee Francis, fourth, right? Yes, whose father was the other interim director.
So I'm a legacy with this, which I'm very honored to be able to be here and talk about my dad, and sort of picking up that history and how that moved around. I did not go through Native Studies. I was an undergrad at the University of Missouri, but I feel like I spent 5 years in the Native Studies department. I did take summer courses, so I was a part of that as well. So in some ways I spent a lot of my time, my early 20s and late teens, really being part of the NAS program and seeing it develop and sort of platform forward, taking and building off of all this work. My dad came in, if I recall correctly, in the fall of '97, and took over as the director, but knowing that my dad was Lee Francis, Dr. Lee Francis III, I'm the fourth, and knowing sort of all this history that came prior to all of this this work, all of these things that have been engineered and built into the space. My dad took up all of that work and all of that, all of these wonderful pieces, and recognizing there was a lot of obstacles from the university side, right, of how to continue to establish this. At this point, 97, it's almost 30, the program is almost 30 years old as a department, as a program. And I think there was starting to get those rumbles again of like, especially after the building was raised, of like, why is this not a department? Why are we not recognized as a full-fledged department? The work that had been done prior to that, Dr. Holloway and all of these amazing folks that had come in, trying to establish sort of the academic credentials behind that, really being able to build that out with faculty, was sort of what was handed to my father when he stepped in. And I think he took up the challenge very directly and deliberately to move it forward, and really also with the help of the students. So when he came in that first year, I had a lot of, I heard a lot of the stories. So I wasn't present directly in the building, but I heard a lot of the stories and a lot of the frustrations about how the university was just kind of dragging their feet. And so one of the first things my dad went to Kiva Club and began to activate the students and really begin to bring the students in. As Native Studies was found, as it was really started in the 70s, he brought that back around and got the young people on board, the students and other faculty folks on board to be able to, begin to petition for making it a department, a full-fledged department, as I think it should have been many years prior to this point. Considering that we have one of the highest concentrations of Native people within any of the 50 states, and especially in this urban area, it's reflective of what was necessary. So the first task was to move from a program to a department, and with the help of the students, if I recall correctly, and I was trying to go back and see if I could find anything from the Lobo, and I have to go to the archives, but I still remember some of the stuff from his paperwork about organizing the Kiva Club and the students to go up to Santa Fe during one of the legislative sessions to petition for a department, right? To use that sort of, that wonderful activism, that sort of power that was moving in that direction, to petition at the legislative session to be able to make this into a full-fledged department, as well as continuing the talks with the administration, with the administration of the University of New Mexico here. And to continue to press them into establishing something that would be for the benefit of the students that were here. And it was pretty quick, the way that turned really fast, because I think the tide was there. There was so much pressure within the university system from the students, with my dad in support, many of the faculty that started to come on board at that time. So 1998 the program was established as a department, a full-fledged department. Under, I think, University Honors, if I'm correct on that. And my dad assumed the role as the first chairperson of the department itself, as a full-fledged department. 1 year later, he worked pretty tirelessly to establish the minor. He got the minor established, I think that was 1999. And then really continued his work in terms of, some of the things that we still see now is a lot of that outreach. So really was working with the local communities, the Pueblo, especially our home community out of Goek, Laguna, to really align with a lot of the students out there, bring them in. Utilizing the new space at Mesa Vista, that's the only space I know, so I love hearing this history, because that's the only space that I sort of existed in, was the library and the balcony. For those of you that knew my dad, he was a smoker. I do not advise it, but that was one of the, when you could still smoke on campus, his little hiding space was on the little balcony outside of the library. That's where he used to hang out. And continue to build those connections within the community, within the governors, within the university, to continue to really promote students, because that was really what his whole aim was, trying to find these opportunities for Native students, and really this sort of community base. And then during that time, he was also working on tenure, so that was a very interesting juggling position. And then I think he stepped down in late 2001, 2002, as the chair, to really focus on his tenure, and he passed away in 2003. But I think his legacy still, exists, one, in the department. The wheels were already going, but I think he was one of the ones that sort of sped the wheels up, which I think we often need in these spaces. And I think, also in just the reflections from a number of students that passed through his courses, that passed through Mesa Vista, that really began to talk about, that talked about how his mentorship was very critical to their getting through the program, to getting through an institution that, without this sort of wonderful space for Native students, can be very, very disorienting in many ways. And so I think that was, sort of one of the long-lasting legacies. I think you came in under his term, Dr. Lee. One of the hires, one of our long-term hires from 20 years ago, and several others, and brought a lot of national Native folks into the space to have conversations, running programs in the evening that still continue on, that was there before, but continuing this, that were, I think, gave the students at the time a really, unique perspective, very different in many ways. Brought in a lot of his connections with writers, people like Robert Conley and Joseph Bruchac, John Harjo back again. If I recall correctly, he brought out John Harrington to come speak, because he was associated with him, so astronauts. So I feel that that's that long-lasting legacy, and I think it's just, for me, to be able to watch that and see that, to continue to be able to interact with Native Studies, to be able to give that, support and that benefit, talking with students and saying, there's a really great program right here down the road. It's a wonderful office and a wonderful location, and you have some world-class faculty as part of this that have been here, since its inception as a department. And I think that's just one of the most astounding things for me and my dad's legacy on that. So, yeah, thanks for, I think we're doing this chronologically. Dr. Lee, I'm sorry, I know you had yours, so we're going to pass it on down the line here. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I'll fill in the history, and then I think have the next part of the story.
Good morning. My name is Greg Kahete. I'm from Santa Clara Pueblo, and also the former director of, actually the last director of Native Studies. I guess I take on the next part of this series. It's kind of like a Netflix series, following the different stages of this evolution. So I guess I'll just pick up where Lee left off in the context of how I came into Native American Studies. I had come to the University of New Mexico from the Institute of American Indian Rights, where I had worked for 21 years. And I left after a stint of 2 years of being dean at the Institute. I came to the University of New Mexico, applied for a job, just almost like going fishing and saying, well, let's see what happens. And I got an offer along with Mary Hiron Belgard from Misleta to come into the College of Education and become the education specialists within the College of Education. So I spent basically 6 years, got my tenure in 2000. But during that time, as Ted was describing, and also Lee was describing, the Institute was going through a variety of, not the Institute, but rather the Institute too, but the Native American Studies program here at the university was going through a variety of different kinds of issues politically, with conflicts with administration. The university then called a program review. I was asked to come in as the internal evaluator, along with Roger Buffalo, who I had worked with at the Institute, who was the external evaluator for the program. And so we did a comprehensive review of the program up to that point in time. Really it was an issue of deep conflict in the context of administration and in the context of the program itself. So, long story short, I was asked to come in to see if I could continue the program. I had everything that Ted had talked about in terms of his accomplishments had basically gone by the wayside as far as administration was concerned at that time. I wish the administration was here, the president and provost, because they're very new. I think the provost has been here just maybe one or two semesters. The president about 2 years. So they don't really know this history. But it is, I think, what I want to really emphasize is that Native Studies is a result of struggle. It didn't just happen. It was not just the good intentions of administrations. In many ways, many of the administrations attempted to find ways to just, make Native Studies disappear. And I think those are the kinds of things that need to be said in a very honest way in telling this story. So, I was asked to come in. We had basically lost most of our funding. We had been transferred to the University College. That was largely a reorganized program under Dean Peter White. It was myself and Delia Halona, and I do want to see if Delia is in here. So we were the only two people left in Native Studies after that administrative, I guess you can think of a word. Yeah, well, anyway, that administrative move. So I was given the task, essentially. I should say, to give him credit, there was another interim director. His name is Steve LeBoff, who I had also worked with at the Institute of American Inuits, who served essentially as an interim director while the Institute was, or rather the Native Studies program was being stabilized administratively. So long story short, I was the interim evaluator. Roger Buffalo Head was the external evaluator. We did a comprehensive evaluation of the program. We determined that the issue was really that the administration had to give more support, administrative support as well as administrative structure to the program, and begin to fund it properly, and also that it was important to move from the minor, which had already been established, to a major in Native American Studies. So I was given that charge. I had one FTE position, which I split in half, brought in two faculty based on that at half-time appointments. I was also full-time appointment in the College of Education. The College of Education graciously allowed me to serve as director, even though I was a full-time professor in the College of Education. So I want to illustrate that because what was going on was a lot of different kinds of very interesting and strange, I would call it, because I was an administrator at IIA. So I would call these very strange kinds of administrative problem solving, I guess you would call it in administrative circles, attempting to find different kinds of ways to create a program almost out of smoke. And so with very little budget, with one staff member and two half-time positions, we started the movement towards the creation of a bachelor's degree in Native American Studies. What had also happened during those 3 years was the Kiva Club had not met for 3 years. Internally, things were going on in terms of the Kiva Club such that the students had not met. They were about to lose their charter, actually, in terms of the whole student club. So the faculty at that time, Native Studies got the students that we had, and we began to try to, in a sense, revive the Kiva Club and move it to its next stage. And basically because we needed student advocacy, and really the Kiva Club at that time, because it was also seminal in the creation of the Native Studies program was really important also in terms of creating this, a body of students who we could go to for support, for the development and also implementation of a bachelor's degree in Native American Studies. So long story short, we moved very quickly, organizing student activism, faculty activism, community activism began to move very, very directly to developing and implementing the paperwork for a bachelor's degree in Native American Studies, which we were able to accomplish in December of 2004, and immediately introduced the degree. With that time, we had 6 minors in Native American Studies. Those minors then elected to become majors, and we also got another 6 to 7 students to come in to also act as, to declare a major in Native Studies. So our first graduating class, I believe, was in 2006. And so there's a lot that happened. There's a tremendous amount that happened in terms of reviving the program, pulling it back up. I think probably Ted, can relate to the politics that were involved with the administration and almost every step of the way in terms of developing the program. I want to thank all of the faculty at that time and many of the administrators who really believed in the program and actually moved to find different kinds of ways from their vantage points to be able to support the program and then to move it forward. In any case, in 2006, we had our first graduating class in bachelor's with bachelor's in Native American Studies. I then began to move towards creating a master's in Native American Studies in 2007, thinking that we could really capitalize on the momentum that we had developed in developing the bachelor's degree. But that, of course, is another story, because one of the issues that, as a director, I saw consistently was changing administrations within the university itself, so that just about when we were about ready to move forward with our plans, a new administration would come in. And of course, that meant that we had to re-educate that administration with regard to the needs, why the program was important, and also to move it forward in terms of the university budgeting process. So the master's took much, much longer to actually come into fruition within the context of these changing administrations. Some of the kinds of things that we did was, I knew also Viola Cordova, Ted and I got together and decided, let's have a Viola Cordova symposium. Here we are. And at that time he was working along with some other colleagues on her papers, putting together some of the key ideas and perspectives that she had with regard to Native American philosophy. We do use that book in our classes, at least in my class, on Native philosophy, because it's a seminal book in terms of what it represents, for Native people as an accomplishment, and also because of the content that it contains. So we began the Viola Cordova Symposium. The first keynote was actually Vandi Loria. I asked Vandi Loria to come and give the first opening keynote, to sort of kick off this symposium. Even this symposium became a struggle, budgetarily and otherwise, to maintain over a period of time because of our budgets being so minimal. Hence, we went forward with a political process to gain some money from the legislative, New Mexico legislature. We were successful at obtaining $207,000. That we thought, oh my goodness, what can we do with $207,000? As it turns out, the following year, the budget office said, well, you have $207,000 and you have to spend that, so you can spend that, and we'll take $207,000 from your budget and move it elsewhere. So these are the kinds of stories I think that are very important, and I think as Viola Cordova said in early days, because she also went through many, many issues with this university with regard to her conflict with both the philosophy department having been turned down for a position that she was fully qualified for, having to sue the university for that, having won that suit, and bringing forward, I think, in many cases, the foundation for the hiring of Native faculty, the many Native faculty that you see today in the various programs throughout the university, were not here during my time as a graduate student here at the University of New Mexico. They were not here. And so I think she was seminal in terms of the kinds of things that she was able to do in the context of this work. And so, that being said, I also want to say that we had a lot of friends and still have a lot of friends within the context of both administration and also faculty at the University of New Mexico, other directors. The story of Native Studies is not too different from the story of Chicana Studies, Chicana Studies. It's not too different from Africana Studies. It's not too different from Women's Studies. What you'll see, and if you really take a look, an honest look at the histories of programs, studies programs in universities, you'll find that these programs are generally marginalized, generally given very little budget. It's a miracle if they have one or two faculty. The other thing I fought for very diligently was full faculty lines within Native Studies, because I didn't think that we could really continue a vibrant bachelor's program unless we had those full-time faculty positions. And certainly the same is true for the master's and the PhD program. So there's a lot of work that remains to be done, I think, by the current faculty and staff of UNM Native Studies. I think that, the future is not guaranteed, and that the struggles that have been an integral part of the history of Native Studies and other studies programs in a sense will continue, maybe become in a different kind of guise, maybe even more challenging than ever before. But one of the things that is very apparent by study, in terms of the studies programs that we have here at the university, is their resilience and the commitment of the part of many students, faculty, and staff to really support these programs and make them work in the context of this university. So while we still remain kind of an anomaly, within the university system, and certainly that's true in terms of what Ted said, in terms of the kinds of ways that we're treated, in terms of our scholarship, having to fight for promotion and tenure, having to do a variety of kinds of things that are considered outside the academic box, but yet very much within the box of supporting our families, our communities, our students at this university. So I'm very proud to have been the director, I think for 18 years. I was appointed in 2000. I didn't take the position until a year after. Linda Martinez, actually, who was in the audience, I think, was a very new faculty in Native Studies. Took the first year of my appointment and was able to hold the position until I was able to get back from sabbatical after my tenure. But again, there's a lot to this story. There's a lot to this story, and I think it behooves us really to tell a truthful story. Not simply a story that is for the sake of PR, but rather to really come forward and say that these programs are essential, especially in the state of New Mexico, especially to the University of New Mexico, that they should be better supported, that they should be acknowledged for the work that they do consistently, that the students that graduate from these programs should be acknowledged for the work that they do and they will do in the context of their communities. One of the things, and I guess I'll finish with this, that I very specifically intended to do was to recreate a bachelor's program that was not like other bachelor's programs in other universities that were Native Studies, which are usually history or social studies oriented, but rather to create a community-based viewpoint in terms of creating a new generation of governance or students that were savvy to the challenges and issues of governance in Native America, to really focus on that community research piece, to really focus on giving skills to the students to communicate their research and their work, to really view and understand that the work of the students that we were producing was really going to be the work of developing leaders, in our communities, both now and into the future. And I think to a large extent that has been accomplished and is being accomplished in each successive graduating class. And I'm glad to have been a part of that, for the past 18 years. I'll be retiring this semester and moving on to other kinds of things. I don't know if I have another program left in me, but I certainly have a lot of research and I certainly have a lot to say. One of the things that happens when you become a director of any kind of program or chair of any program is that your research literally stops. And you focus, and you have to focus on the program that you're developing. So I'm moving forward and hopefully moving into some very challenging research in terms of climate change worldwide, and also creating new forms of curriculum that deal with adaptation to the challenges of climate change. So, thank you.
Thank you very much to all three of you. I think it's a rich narrative of the history and origins of NAS in the last 50 years, and I want to thank you very much for sharing the truth and for sharing your knowledge and experiences with NAS. We have about 10 minutes before we go into our next presentations, and so I wanted to give a chance to the audience to ask any question that they may have. We'll take a couple of questions for the panelists. If you want to raise your hand or shout out at me or something, go ahead and do that.
You said at this university. Okay, I think Native Studies at UNM is currently in an excellent position, to move forward, well, especially with the PhD program. So you'll be a full, comprehensive Native Studies program, which there are few in the country right now. But that being said, that's also in a sense, being in the big leagues, so to speak, and it's going to require some very effective strategy and implementation of those strategies, particularly with regard to universities and their dwindling resources, dwindling students. While many universities are losing students, I think a lot of the studies programs are gaining students, so that you have an interesting kind of dynamic going on, with universities. And I'm hoping that you capitalize on well, at least some of the current said support of the administration, to move forward as quickly as possible, to create the PhD program and to create this comprehensive. But knowing also that these are going to be struggles, and it's going to require more faculty and more funding to properly implement these programs. And that's going to be the biggest issue. is getting that funding, not only from the university, but also getting that funding from the legislature in terms of recurring funding that really does support the program and move it into the future. So I think the future is bright at this point, but it's still cloudy, you know, in terms of where these kinds of things will fall. I think Native Studies must develop a comprehensive foundation grant system, pulling monies from a variety of different sources besides the university and besides the legislature. And that's where you create a vibrant program in the context of the current scenario. Also, I see that, you know, because I work in climate change and I'm very aware of what's going to be happening in the next 10 years. It isn't a pretty picture. It is not, it's a very challenging picture. And I think that programs like Native Studies and the other ethnic studies programs and the women's studies programs, because they are really servicing the needs and addressing the needs of both students and community. They're going to move to the forefront in terms of what a university actually should begin to look like. And I'm hoping that this university takes heed of that in the context of their planning for the next 10 years.
That's interesting.
Well, I guess from my perspective, the number one thing on the agenda is to get your own place. A lot of my scholarship and advocacy is really focused on placemaking, and I think it's been too long that our community has been in arrears with regards to having its own place. The University of New Mexico, since its day of inception, has leveraged our identity and our culture in order to build its programs, and yet it hasn't reciprocated in really creating that for our community. So I think that should be the number one driving agenda. And then from there, I feel that the idea of really looking at how it is that we continue to sort of build on our issues around community engagement and seeing how it is that we reciprocate in terms of this being a resource to our tribal communities and our students is really also long overdue. You know, this is a public university, and we should be structured in a way to help build capacity for the tribes in order to be able to continue exercising their sovereignty in a way that feels all the kinds of external forces that are still leveraging to make it into the other. So I think it has a huge role with regards to how it might be able to pursue that in the future. And you know, if we look at it in the context of all the other kinds of things that are going on, especially with our cousins in Canada and New Zealand, Hawaii, Australia, they actually are making much more progress than we are in many cases. And that's unfortunate because we're in the middle of Indian country, and in fact, we were just talking about how to frame that conversation between this corridor of Indianness that goes from Oklahoma to New Mexico to Arizona. Well, we're right in the center of that. So why are we still preoccupied with this myth of Route 66 when in fact we should essentially reverse that and say, we're native and we're going to continue in order to be able to assert ourselves, and yes, we haven't gone away, we haven't been extinguished, and we should become the center of all of that energy and responsiveness and resiliency and sustainability.
I think there's, I mean, I absolutely agree with the sentiment of the place, and you know, get your own place, right? I think that's really important. I think one of it's establishing a different identity. It's establishing what was there before, and you know, continuing to make that home in a different way. I think is really important. So definitely, I think that's the trajectory. Definitely, if I'm imagining, envisioning, seeing that, you know, that Center for Native American Studies, right? I think, you know, the second part is, for me, is always that sort of dream big, and what I
I'd love to continue to see is this cutting edge work. I'm absolutely in agreement that like what we've been talking around in indigenous futurisms, indigenous sustainability, I mean like native concepts and indigenous concepts are going to be the way that we are able to survive going forward. And I think that that's one of the big things. I think that's where a lot of the recruitment is going to come. I think also just continuing in the trend of what Native Studies, you know, when they were started, when it was established with Jack Forbes back in DQU and these early programs that were there, is to continue to develop that leadership. You know, this leadership that is grounded in their own community, this leadership that's grounded in their own identity as Indigenous, as Native, as American Indian, however we want to identify in that space, as your own tribal home community. That leadership is going to be even more critical going forward. And I think that part, that it's, you know, this continuation of that. I mean, you're having a PhD program. I'm always of the mind, more PhDs for Native kids, this robust thinking, right? So, you know, I see that as a movement forward. I think the danger is still the institution. I think there's an assault on studies programs, and I think that it's going to take a lot of strong faculty that's here and strong students to continue to provide the, you know, the barriers, the walls, the obstacles, the advocacy, the activism that allows the programs to continue to flourish, the need for support, but also not, you know, what's the big consolidation movements right now that we're seeing in universities where it's consolidated into one sort of pan studies. But we recognize that we need to keep our own identities in this. This is Native studies. This is, you know, Chicanic studies, Chicano studies. This is, you know, African studies, etc. Asian American studies. All the way down the list, that the necessity for that, because we're developing this leadership and capacity within our own communities, and especially here in the state of New Mexico. I think we need to make sure that we're always sort of vigilant of that, to continue what has been done for the last 50 years, and to continue to move forward.
Well, that's a great way to end the panel there. So why don't we give one round of applause for the panelists this morning. Some great stories and narratives of the origins of NAS at UNM.